Hello and welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. My name is Tyler, and of course, we have another horrible episode to record in this season of Baltimore Orioles baseball. Our Orioles lose three more games this week against the Minnesota Twins, getting swept for the second time in a week and a half against the same baseball team, which is, I think the Twins have now won 11 games in a row. Six of those games are against the Orioles, but still 11 in a row. Impressive stuff. But prior to that, these Twins were not a terribly good team. They didn't look particularly impressive in any facet of the baseball game, and yet they beat the Orioles six times in the last, like I said, week and a half. Each game kind of had its own flavor of sadness. Of course, the rain out in Game One made Game One into a doubleheader on Wednesday. Lost 6-3 in the opener. Dean Kramer didn't do great. Couldn't shut down the Twins after the Orioles scored early, and the Orioles didn't really support him in the second half of the game. In the second game, that was the Chase McDermott game. McDermott didn't pitch terribly well. The bullpen was bad. The Orioles did score some runs, 6 runs, but not enough because the bullpen had a terrible game. And then in the fourth game, sort of the issue we've seen a lot of the season is, you finally get a good start, a decent start anyway from Sagano. Sagano's been, really good for the Orioles all year, pitches well here. Orioles can't score any runs against Chris Paddock. And that's the series right there. And it just, they had the lead in games one and two a couple of times, couldn't hold on to it. Felt like they were demoralized in game three, didn't really put up much of a fight. And now they sit at what, 15 and 27 on the season. We're officially past the quarter pole of the 2025 Orioles season, a season that was supposed to be a promising one. This was a team that I think came in with a deep postseason run as their intention. Um, and it's just not really working out. This is kind of what I talked about in my last episode after the previous Twins sweeping. This team just doesn't feel like they've got it. Now, importantly, we asked you got to ask the players about this, and that's what the reporters did after this most recent loss. And it was sort of a whiplash effect because the Orioles, yes, they'd gotten swept by the Twins, and they took 2 out of 3 in Anaheim. You feel good about that. Anaheim's not a good team, but you took 2 out of 3. You went on the road. That's an achievement. Okay, this is what we need to start. Moving forward now. We're going home. We're going to play a team we just played. We're familiar with them. Let's get some wins, and it doesn't happen. So the press asks the players about this, and Ryan O'Hearn says, "It's frustrating. Losing sucks. It's not fun. Nobody in here is having a good time, and I promise you, nobody cares more than the guys in this clubhouse." With that being said, we have to keep fighting. There's no other option. You have to keep fighting. You can't give up. You can't give in. I believe in the guys in the clubhouse. We have talented players. We just have to keep fighting. There is no other option. He later said, "You've got to be optimistic. I don't ever show up to the ballpark thinking that we're going to lose. It was a good series in Anaheim, and this feels like a kick in the pants for sure." Now, the article, which is on MLB.com, which is despite worst record since 21, O's believe we can turn things around. They do go on to kind of cite that this would not be an unprecedented turnaround if the Orioles were to do it. It would make Orioles history, but it's not necessarily the first time that this would happen in Major League history. They cite a couple of instances. The 2005 Astros, they were 15 and 27 also. Then they actually lost three more games after that to go 15 and 30. They rallied to finish 89 and 73 and made the World Series where they lost. In 2018, the Dodgers started 16 and 26 before finishing at 92 and 71 and won the NL West. The 2022 Mariners started 17 and 25 and ended up at 90 and 72 to make the postseason. I also found a couple of other instances that are comparable. The 2003 Florida Marlins, who actually won the World Series, I was trying to find the exact, the bottom of their performance, but they were, it looks like 19 and 29 on May 22nd of that season. So they were 10 games under 500, rebound to win 91, which was second in the NL East that year, but they do make the World Series. I already mentioned the Astros in 2005, 2007 Rockies lost in the World Series to the Red Sox, but remember they had a really good run at the end of that season to even make the postseason. Trying to find where their worst spot was. They were worse a little bit earlier in the season. Looks like they got down to 17 and 25 and then started to improve a little bit there. So the Orioles are already in a worse spot than the Rockies were, but the Rockies needed like a really hot finish. I think they went like what 14-1 in the final 2.5 weeks of the season to make the postseason. And then just last year, I think is probably the most relevant example because a lot of these are 20 plus years ago. I mean, the 2003 Marlins, the 2005 Astros, like that's great that it happened, but 20 years ago, when a lot of these players were children, didn't even care about baseball yet at that point, you know, doesn't feel super relevant. Whereas the 2024 New York Mets just last season, I think I've referenced these guys before, but they were 22 and 33 on May 29th of last year. They were 24 and 35 on June 2nd. And it looks like then they started to turn things around there. So June 2nd of last year, the Mets were 24 and 35, so 11 games under 500. The Orioles are 12 games under 500 a little bit earlier in the season. The Mets turn it around, make the playoffs, go to the NLCS, and now the Mets are, one of the best teams in the league this year. Of course, they've signed Juan Soto. Soto's not really hitting that great yet, but they've turned things around, in a calendar year to be really, really good. And, can the Orioles do that same thing? I think is kind of, the theme of this episode is, they're 12 under 500. They just got swept after winning a series. It feels sort of like the bottom that we're in right now. I mean, it could get worse, clearly. If this team is legitimately terrible, it can get worse from here, of course. But this feels like the bottom right now that we're in. And this is sort of a defining moment for the Baltimore Orioles in the 2025 season is can they pivot? Can they make a change? Can they turn things around? Because the only positive for the Orioles right now is that they have time on their side. If it was August and they were 12 games under 500, look, it's over. Yes, it's mathematically possible at that point to turn things around, but you have to play really, really well in a short amount of time, and there's no buffer there. At least for the Orioles, it is mid-May, so there is time. There is June, July, August, and September, plus the rest of May. You got 4.5 months to get out of this tailspin. But at the same time, it ain't like it happens all the time. Have a ton of teams to climb over, and it doesn't feel, if you're a betting person, you're not going to bet on these Orioles to really turn it around. And not that this is betting odds, but this is just the odds from Baseball Reference's playoff odds. They give the Orioles less than a 1% chance to make the postseason and less than 1/10 of 1% chance to win the World Series, which coming into the season, I think it was, probably not over double digit percentage chance to win the World Series, probably like a 5 or 6% chance, but the chances to make the playoffs were probably much higher, probably 40%, something like that. And now it is a less than 1% chance to make the playoffs. And it's just, it's just a really sad state of affairs. I think some people want to start to turn on Brandon Hyde a little bit right now. You talk about him, his decision making, in-game decisions, when to use the bullpen, when to put the pitchers in the game, yada yada yada. I you know I have a hard time doing that given the context in which we are seeing these games being played, and I think that is the reason why I am. Me, Jesse, and Eli were talking about this via text the other day. Are we ready to like bury the 2025 Orioles and like turn towards 2026? And I said, I think I'm ready to bury the 2025 Orioles, but I don't know that I'm ready to turn and like put all my vim and vigor into 2026 because the team has been so bad for basically a year now that my confidence beyond this season is pretty well sapped as well. So let's take a moment and I can explain why I might have that thought as far as why I'm a little bit worried about the Orioles moving forward. So the first thing is you got to look at the roster because this is the essence of what makes you competitive or not. And the Orioles have some issues here. On the pitching side in particular, I'm worried about. And this is something that we people talk about all the time with the Orioles and their development strategies. It was, you know, concentrate the power on the offensive side of the ball, on the position player side. Use the high draft picks on those players, put a lot of the development resources into it. Try to get pitching talent later. Certainly, the Orioles don't ignore pitching completely, but they don't put as many resources into it. They believe in their development abilities to take these lower drafted players and turn them into capable, starters and relievers. And I think there's been some evidence that they've done a decent job of that on the bullpen side of things, but on the starting side of things, I have no evidence to suggest that the Orioles have been able to do that. I think maybe you could say they've done it with Kyle Bradish because Bradish was is a wholly owned prospect of Mike Elias in terms of got him from the Angels in the Dylan Bundy trade, brought him up through the system. And the Angels have a tendency to not really use their pitching prospects the first season they get them. Like they draft the guys and don't always use them that first year. So he hadn't really pitched for the Angels much. So Bradish is, while not technically 100% homegrown, pretty darn close to it. He's really the only one. And obviously has had injury stuff the last 2 years. So you can't even totally say, you know, he's a no doubt about it ace. But of course, when Bradish has pitched the last, previous 2 seasons, he's been fantastic. Um, Other than that, I don't know that there's much evidence of that. They inherited top prospects in DL Hall and Grayson Rodriguez. Hall, I think, was always kind of a wild card, has had injury stuff now with the Brewers. Couldn't really get it figured out here in Baltimore. Grayson Rodriguez performed really well in the minors, but I think as a major league pitcher has had some issues. Not to say that he's not been a productive major league pitcher, but he's not been that ace type that I think a lot of us were hoping to be. He's shown that ability in spurts for sure, but not with any consistency. And now he's had shoulder issues time and time again. Of course, that this is almost evidence of why Mike Elias and the Orioles would explain that we don't put a ton of resources into pitching because the injuries are so frequent and often so catastrophic that it feels like a waste to put all this time and effort and money into a player that has a high likelihood or a higher likelihood of kind of burning out quickly because the attrition rate is so high. But there's that. Cade Povich got him from the Twins, was an intriguing prospect. He's gotten to the majors, which is great. I find him still intriguing. I like what he does, but he certainly isn't a top of the rotation guy. He's a back end arm. Then you look at who's actually pitched well for the Orioles this year. It's Eflin and Sagano. So these are two guys, veterans. Eflin obviously been around the majors for a long time, has done well. A good trade last year that Elias made, but Eflin's going to be gone next year. Sagano comes over from Japan, has been really good so far. He's on a 1 year deal though, 35 years old. He's probably going to go next year. He's probably going to get a 3 year deal, I would think, something like that, like $15 million a year. Would the Orioles pay that? Should they pay that? I don't know, but he's going to test the free agent market. Um, Kramer had been good for a little bit there, struggled in this Twins start, has had a not a great season overall. He is what he is, I think, at this point. There's no real question marks left about Dean Kramer. He's a back end arm as well. Kyle Gibson, he's going to be gone after this season. So, going into 2026, who do you have? You have hopefully a healthy Rodriguez and Bradish. That's an okay start. Povich as an option in there. McDermott as an option. Brandon Young as an option. Um, who else? I don't know. Maybe I'm forgetting some names, but those are kind of the main in-house guys. You'd assume the Orioles will sign somebody, but that's been a whole thing with the Orioles and signing free agent pitchers is they don't love to do it. Um, and when they do, it's often these 1 year stopgap kind of guys. Maybe they make a trade. They almost have to make a trade. But they've needed to make a trade for a long time for a long-term solution to the rotation. They haven't done it to this point. Will they do it? I don't know. So that's the first one is you're going into 2026 with hopefully healthy Rodriguez and Bradish. That's a decent top of the rotation. You need one more guy though, and the Orioles still haven't really shown an ability to do that. And it doesn't sound like there's a guy coming from in-house that's going to be able to fill that void any better than, Povich or Kramer is going to do as back end arms. Bullpen, I feel okay about. Bautista has looked good. They've been cautious with him. But when he's pitched, he's looked really good. He looks like he's getting even better. Cano going through a rough patch right now, but we kind of know what he is. He has his moments where he's really dialed in and looks good. And then, like every other relief pitcher in Major League Baseball, pretty much struggles. But I feel decent about that back end of Cano and Batista still. Dominguez, Soto, they're going to be gone. And really, you're not planning a bullpen out too terribly much beyond that. Some of these guys I mentioned earlier, McDermott in particular, I think could end up in the bullpen as a viable back end arm that throws really hard and gets strikeouts because he walks way too many guys. You throw McDermott in there, I feel decent about that. Batista, Cano, McDermott. You figure out the lefty stuff. Maybe it's Aiken. It's probably not Perez. The bullpen is okay, and pretty much every team in Major League Baseball, if the bullpen's good this year, it's probably going to be a disaster next year and vice versa. So the bullpen is what it is. More of the issues now are on the lineup side of things, right? I think we expect the pitching to be what it is. The Orioles haven't put a ton of resources into it. You hope the guys are going to get healthy and that's going to solve some issues, but who knows? But the bread and butter is the lineup stuff, and that's where the Orioles have really kind of failed this year, I think, in particular. Um, I think they even would admit that they didn't have 100% confidence in the pitching staff. They thought maybe it'd work, hasn't really worked. But the lineup, there's no doubt that the lineup is where they kind of think they make their money there. And it just has not has not worked um, at all for the Orioles this year, particularly behind the plate. I'll bring up the stats here on the YouTube page, which if you're not following us on YouTube, head over to youtube.com, search the Warehouse Podcast, and we'll pop up. I think we got just over the 300 subscriber mark, which is awesome. We'd love to get to 500 by the end of the season. So if you are interested in that, seeing me kind of give a screen share and go through the things I'm talking about, head over to youtube.com and give us a subscription there. It'd be awesome. It's totally free, just helps us reach more people. But yeah, on the offensive side of things, Adley Rutschman, and this is going to be a little bit of a reiteration from what I talked about my last episode, but Adley, 83 OPS plus, Ryan Mountcastle, 79 OPS plus, Heston Kjerstad, 79 OPS plus, Tyler O'Neill, 76 OPS plus. And the Tyler O'Neill is going to be an issue because O'Neill, you almost want O'Neill to be good this year because you probably want him to opt out if you are the Orioles. The contract is constructed such that if he performs well, he's not going to be here next year, and if he doesn't perform well, he's gonna be here next year. So you kind of want him to be playing well enough that he opts out to, you know, go into greener pastures, potentially net the Orioles a draft pick. But right now, it feels like Tyler O'Neill is going to be back next year, and him hitting 76 OPS plus is not ideal for the Orioles' future plans. Um, Jordan Westburg hurt right now, 88 OPS plus. Gary Sanchez has been a disaster as the backup catcher, -9 OPS plus. So now that Maverick Hanley has to be the backup catcher, who he's not really a viable major league hitter. I think he's handling the pitching staff okay enough. Not a viable major league hitter. He is, let's see, 1 for 12 with 5 strikeouts, 2 RBIs. He had a big game or a nice game in Anaheim last week. But other than that, looks overpowered, overmatched at the plate in the major leagues. And then Kobe Mayo, another struggle for him. 1 for 12 with a walk and 6 strikeouts. He's back down to AAA now. So some of these guys are supposed to be sort of stalwarts of your offense. Of these are high draft picks. It's Rutschman a 1 overall, Kjerstad second overall. Mayo was not a first round pick, but was a guy you paid a little extra for to get him to forego a college commitment to get in the organization. Has been a highly touted prospect. It's not working. It's not working. And I went on my Mayo diatribe last episode, so I'll leave it there. But if these guys don't work, it's not like the Orioles have a ton of reinforcements ready to go because that's just not how you're constructed as an organization. You're not ready to churn out a new, high tier prospect every single year. Although it feels like the Orioles have been willing to do that, you can't do it at every single position. So if Rutschman doesn't work, yes, they have Basayo, but the other guys not so much. Mountcastle, maybe Basayo could come up and play catcher and first base, so there's maybe some semi solution there to either one. But you'd love to see one of those guys figured out, particularly Rutschman. Rutschman's got enough exciting peripherals that I think he can turn it around. A lot of his numbers look better this year, or his expected numbers look better this year than they have been. So you hope he's going to turn around. Mountcastle, I'm not so sure about that, and I'm pretty worried about him at the moment. He's in 41 games. He's got uh, a 234 batting average, 272 on base, and a 348 slug. He's got 2 home runs, 14 RBI, 7 walks, and 34 strikeouts. Rutschman is at least, being disciplined. He's getting on base at a decent enough clip for what his batting average is. He's batting 200, but he's getting on base at a 300 clip because he's walking a decent amount. He's walking pretty much every other game. He's not really striking out a ton. 24 strikeouts in 40 games isn't terrible. It's really just he's got to, when he hits the ball, it's got to get a hit, and it's just not happening. Kjerstad, he's getting yo-yoed around a little bit, but again, he doesn't look great, striking out a decent amount. And then Westburg, you hope it's a health thing with Westburg. He really missed a lot of pretty much the second half last year. Came back at the very end, didn't do very well. Had a good first, week of the season this year, but has really, really cooled off there. And now he's got some injury stuff that you hope he's going to bounce back from. But the hamstring having some issues for him there. So it's just a lot of really important guys are not playing well, and they've been not playing well for a long time now. Like I said, Rutschman's issues go back to last year. Westberg hasn't really played much in a year. Kjerstad really didn't show much last year. Who else is there? Mountcastle. The power just hasn't really been there as much as you'd hope to, especially with the left field walls coming in a little bit. Hasn't really shown anything. So if these guys aren't working, you don't have immediate solutions there. Yes, you can go buy a free agent or two, but that's not how the Orioles are built. That's not the philosophy, and it doesn't feel like a repeatable process for them to get to, the promised land, especially when the Yankees can do it 10 times over what the Orioles are able to do. Now, the positive side of things, Gunnar is turning it around, and Gunnar looks really good now. Gunnar is leading the offense, but it's also now if Gunner's not hitting, the offense kind of doesn't do anything. But Gunner looks like Gunner again this last week or so. So that's great. Jackson Holliday has cooled off a little bit the last couple days, but his in general, I think, looked improved this season. The defensive metrics don't love him, so that's why his WAR is only 0.1. But the offense is better. He's batting 250 with a 316 on base and a 379 slug. He's got 4 home runs, two of which came in one game. Not hitting for a ton of power. Two stolen bases, caught stealing 3 times. So that element that I think we were promised was going to be a bigger part of his game this year isn't totally there yet. 10 walks, 32 strikeouts. He's actually walking slightly more than Gunner is, and he's striking out less, which is, good. I mean, he doesn't have the power threat that Gunner does. So you don't really want to see him striking out anywhere near that. But for a guy who's, still only 21, has less than a full season of experience, I've been encouraged by Holiday, so I think he's going to continue to get better. Mullins has really cooled off, but he's still at a 127 OPS plus. I think he's setting himself up to get a nice contract this offseason, which is great. It's probably not going to be with the Orioles, though, because I think he ultimately is kind of regressing to what we expect him to be, which is, maybe a 105 OPS plus kind of guy, like a slightly above average hitter, a good defender, good on base guy, good clubhouse guy, which is great. I just don't know if the Orioles are going to be the ones to pay him. And then Ryan O'Hearn continues to be pretty much the beast of the team right now in terms of offense. 158, or I'm sorry, yeah, 158 OPS plus, team leading 7 home runs, 14 RBI, 13 walks, and only 20 strikeouts in 33 games. Ryan O'Hearn, I've said it before on this podcast, I'll say it again. He should be playing every single day. I don't care about lefty righty. He's the best hitter on the team. Play him every day. But again, I think his contract expires after this season as well. So as good as he's been, is he going to go be that for somebody else next year? Um, you know, I don't know. We'll see. But you kind of get the point I'm making here, which is to say the team is relying on a lot of, well, if this happens and then that happens, they'll be in a good spot. But these guys didn't have long enough track records coming into this year for you to say, well, there's no, don't worry about it. We got Adley behind the plate, so it's all going to be good. Like, no. Adley wasn't good in the second half last year. Adley hasn't been good in the first half this year. He's a catcher. There's wear and tear. I look. I said on this podcast for a long time. He's playing too much. He's playing too much. They need to take him out more. He needs to DH more. He needs to take days off. And I get that. That's the role of the modern catcher has changed a little bit. They do play more. He needs to get more days off. And are we already seeing the wear and tear here potentially? And it's not like the Orioles can really do much about it now because he is viable and Maverick Hanley really isn't, and Gary Sanchez has been bad when he's played. So it's like Adley, you gotta figure it out, man. Now maybe Basayo comes up, they can maybe 50-50 the job a little bit, and that'll get both of them off their knees. But Basayo, I don't think is even playing defense yet. We're a ways off from Basayo playing catcher at the major league level. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about is we're relying a lot on like if this happens and this should be better, but the track record just isn't there for a lot of the guys. Jackson Holliday, we're relying on scouting reports to say he's going to be this star. Hasn't shown to be a star yet. He is improved, but hasn't shown that. Kerstad, we still don't know what he is. I mean, there's been question marks about him for a long time about elements of his game, but hitting and power weren't supposed to be them. And he's not really hitting this year. So what is he? What's the value of him? Kobe Mayo, same deal. We've been told a lot of things. Yes, he doesn't have a ton of experience, but he has looked really, really bad at the major league level every time tried to hit the baseball. Didn't have a good spring at the major league level this past spring. So what do you do there? Colton Cowser, you think he's going to come back and probably be fine, so there's that element there. But is there enough here that the Orioles can bide their time and tread water until they get healthy enough for us to say now we can start actually like considering this to be the Orioles of 2025? Because yeah, they don't have Westberg, they don't have Cowser, they don't have Bradish, they don't have Rodriguez. I get all that, but how long you got to wait? The team needs to be, they need to basically play like 500 or slightly above 500 for the next few weeks. Then they're going to get Cowser back maybe in June. Westbrook hopefully is coming back. But you're not going to have the pitchers back. Rodriguez isn't going to be back until late July, probably at the earliest, if he starts throwing like tomorrow. And that's no guarantee. And, Bradish and Wells probably sometime in August if things are going well, which it sounds like things are going well for Bradish in particular. And Bradish came back earlier last year than they thought he was gonna. So there are some reasons to say, yeah, once this team is fully 100%, they're going to go on a run here, but they got to get to that point first. They're already 12 under 500. They can't be 20 under 500. There's not enough time at that point. Um, And by the time those guys are healthy, somebody else could go down. I mean, if something happens to Gunner, the season is officially fully gone. He's the only one hitting right now, him and O'Hearn. So it's that kind of a thing where, they missed him for some time. Offense wasn't good. He's back. Well, he wasn't very good. The offense wasn't good. Now he is hitting. The offense still isn't all that good. So, you know, he's the one thing holding the whole ship up. And if he doesn't pitch well or if he doesn't play well, it's all going to fall apart. And it's just a lot of things there that makes me feel like, yes, there's precedent for teams bouncing back from being 12, 15 games under 500, a quarter of the way through the season or a little bit more. But are the Orioles that team to do it? I don't know. I will say I think the Orioles are better than what they've shown. I think they shouldn't be in the ballpark of the Angels or the White Sox. They should be, some separation there. I think they should be above teams like the Blue Jays and the Rays in the East, but they haven't played like it. Talent says they should be, but they haven't played like it. And, the more days that go by, you lose more games than you win. That hole gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and these guys that come back from injuries aren't going to be able to help you. And if they do, somebody else might be out by the time they get back. So, am I ready to bury the 2025 Baltimore Orioles? I think I am. That doesn't mean that the season is worthless. I still want to see growth from Holiday. I want to see Westbrook get back, get healthy, get right. I want Adley to turn things around. I want Kobe Mayo to come up at some point and play well. I want Sammy Basayo to come up at some point and play well. I want to see Bradish and Rodriguez get healthy and pitch decently well in August and September. Even if they're not fantastic, I want, some peripheral stats to look good. I want good velocities. I want them to feel good. I want them to bounce back and be able to make a start in a fifth day later rather than needing to skip starts or things like that. I want to see all those things. But that doesn't mean that there's enough there for me to say, oh, well, this team can turn around from 12 games under 500, go on a run and win the World Series or even, just make the playoffs at the very least. That's kind of like it's reduced my expectations. I don't even expect these guys to make a playoff run or even make the playoffs, but I'd love to see them get to 500 before the end of the season, and that's not going to be good enough to make the playoffs. And it feels like a monumental task to get there. So, is the Orioles season over in terms of playoff push, World Series run? I think yes. That doesn't mean it's worthless, though. It doesn't mean Brandon Hyde needs to be fired in season. I think off season is a different discussion. Um, because ultimately, I don't put a lot of this at Brandon Hyde's feet. I don't even put all the injuries at Mike Elias's feet. Although Mike Elias did construct the team, and the pitching in particular, Mike Elias deserves some blame because he didn't get enough high end guys to really offset, a pitcher like Charlie Morton who has been healthy and just been bad. And Dean Kramer's been not very good. And, I think we should have been searching for a Dean Kramer upgrade at some point anyway, and we just didn't do it. So I do put more of the blame at Mike Elias's feet. I'm not going to get rid of him in the middle of the season. I'm not going to get rid of Brandon Hyde in the middle of the season. But I do think that if this team, if they show some fight in the second half of the year, maybe you keep guys on. But if it continues to be sort of a slog and this team underperforms and all that, you got to make changes of some kind in the offseason. And I think ultimately that's going to become a Brandon Hyde problem, just because that's how these things tend to go. Is the team's not performing, the manager needs to bite the dust first, and if it's still not working, the GM needs to go, and we're gonna try this out all over again because I think we're gonna learn a lot about David Rubenstein at that time as well as is this guy as thirsty for a World Series win as he claimed to be when he first took over the team. We'll find out about that, but yeah, look, I'm still gonna watch the games. I still have things to learn about the Orioles from this season, but in terms of hoping for a long postseason run, I I have to be honest with myself and say that that's probably not going to happen, and that's a real shame. But it's their own fault. They just haven't played well enough. So that's it for this episode. Jesse will be back after the weekend with a recap of the National Series. Hopefully, the Orioles can win some games there. If you guys like this show, please subscribe to us on your preferred podcast app, whether that's Spotify, Apple, or elsewhere. It's free. Give us a rating and a review. That would be awesome. 5 stars, please, so we can reach more people. Same deal on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, search The Warehouse Pod. We'll pop up. Like I said, we're around 300 subscribers now. We'd love to get to 500 by the end of the season. So if you like us there, give us a like to the video and subscribe, and then leave some comments in the video description or in the below the video rather. Are you thinking the 2025 Orioles season is sunk already? Or are you a little bit more optimistic than I am? Would love to hear from you. We're also on social media at The Warehouse Pod on Blue Sky and on Twitter. And you can email us the show at thewarehousepod@gmail.com. So that's all I got for now. Like I said, my name is Tyler. This is the Warehouse Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Go to believe.com, BLEAV.com, and check out what we've got cooking there, not just for us, but other shows as well. And yeah, we will talk to you, like I said, after the weekend with a recap of the National Series. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.